Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Theresa May has caved into pressure from Tory Brexiteers over her plan for leaving the European Union.
We'll continue.
John Sobel in Helsinki, thank you. You reject her Brexit proposals. Meanwhile, calls by a former cabinet minister for a second referendum to break the political deadlock over Brexit has been ruled out by the government. Our political editor, Laura Kuensberg, has been following the latest developments.
Like these.
Oh, wow.
So we have, yes. So
Objects might not be what they first appear. Theresa May's carefully manufactured Brexit compromise might now be missing some of its crucial parts. The Prime Minister's sticking to her script that the Chequers plan is the right one.
Our proposal sets out the right deal for the UK, honouring the democratic decision of the British people, protecting the integrity of our precious union, supporting growth, maintaining security and safeguarding British jobs.
Are you running for leader, Mr Johnson?
It's not just the resignation of two senior ministers she has to worry about now, even if Boris Johnson is yet to move out of the Foreign Secretary's swanky pad. He and David Davis both quit over the plan, believing it keeps us too close to the EU after we leave.
do you regret resigning?
No, not for a moment.
But dozens of Tories were ready tonight to vote against the government to protest. But facing defeat, ministers backed down on some parts.
It's quite clear that Chequers and the white paper that was published last week simply do not restate what the Prime Minister had committed even something like 10 days ago.
Downing Street's trying to claim they haven't given in to the Eurosceptic group.
I would not have gone through all the work that I did to ensure that we reached that agreement, only to see it changed in some way through these bills. They do.
Frankly, that's just not what many MPs believe.
And one has to wonder now, who is in charge? Who's running Britain? Is it the Prime Minister or is it the Honourable Member for North East Somerset? I know where my money's sitting at the moment.
Confused about what's going on in there? Well, it took months for Theresa May to get most of her ministers to agree her Chequers compromise. It might not have been perfect, but it was a plan that Number 10 hoped would endure. But some Brexiteers were so cross with elements of it that they produced some of their own tweaks to try to force her to back down. It was a power play, and for today at least, Number 10 has let them have their way. But if Parliament day by day finds it harder to agree anything, should in the end the big choice come back to you?
I would have liked it if Parliament had been able to reach a compromise, but it is clear to me that it can't. And I think you either put your head in the sand or you recognise that reality, you're pragmatic, and then you ask yourself, well, what's the way that we can still get through this and that we can still perhaps deliver on the Brexit that people wanted, that we can still put the choice in front of the British people.
Politicians are miles away from agreeing that, having another brutal referendum, a fight that could be tougher on all sides than the last time round. But ideas about how to move forward are in short supply.
And Fiona, if it looks like a mess in Westminster tonight, that's because it is a mess in Westminster tonight. The Prime Minister came up with her Chequers plan over many, many months, and she hoped that it would at least draw a line in the sand. Number 10 always knew that there would be grumpiness, there would be resistance. But tonight, there's a rather different feeling. One that it seems they're really struggling to stay in control.
Laura in Westminster, thank you.
Now, Brexit supporting Conservative backbenchers have forced the government to accept a series of amendments to its cross-border trade bill that appear to significantly alter the Brexit deal struck by the cabinet at Chequers. Theresa May claimed the Chequers agreement had not been changed, but the climb down has prompted a furious row across Conservative benches. Tory Remainers claiming the government is being held to ransom by just 40 MPs and that Jacob Rees-Mogg appeared to be running the country rather than the Prime Minister. Our political editor Gary Gibbon is in Westminster. Gary.
Well, this was the government policy announced last Thursday, and it's Monday when I last checked, and today some Tory Brexiteers ripped a hole in it. They are suggesting they weren't quite meaning to do that, and they were just probing and putting down an amendment because they wanted to see, test exactly what it was the government was up to here. But what they were doing was actually trying to do a show of strength, and they won. It relates to the customs elements of the government white paper on Brexit, painstakingly put together over a long period. And one of the things it says in the white paper is that Britain would collect EU tariffs at its border, the UK's border, but it wouldn't expect the EU to do a reciprocal arrangement, because the government knew that was a deal breaker. There are probably some other deal breakers lurking in here, but the rebels put down an amendment trying to add as a deal breaker the idea that the EU would collect tariffs for Britain. And the government has accepted it. Now, with a pretty Jesuitical straining of language, they're saying this isn't actually a breach, it's consistent with government policy, but virtually nobody believes them, least of all the rebels who put down that amendment with a view to exposing the weakness of the government. They're a pretty controlled group, the European Research Group, pretty disciplined, and one of the messages that went out to their MPs, though, today was don't be smug. I have to tell the organisers of that group, some of those MPs are failing to follow that injunction tonight. I talked before about how the Prime Minister seems to be sort of dashing for the recess like someone running for a bus shelter in a storm. And now we discover, under review as we speak, the idea of bringing forward the date of the recess. Parliament might start its summer holidays as soon as Thursday rather than Tuesday of next week. But that won't save the Prime Minister from potentially a resignation speech on Wednesday from Boris Johnson and a meeting with her own MPs. But here's how today's action-packed day for the Prime Minister went.
At the Farnborough Air Show, Theresa May was trying to sell her Chequers Brexit deal as one that works for business. But today she had to surrender to pro-Brexit Tory backbenchers who want to kill off her Brexit plans.
Like these. Oh, wow.
When she got back to London, the Prime Minister had to defend the fact that she'd accepted an amendment from pro-Brexit Tories that requires the EU to collect British tariffs at its borders, something the EU has said is completely unacceptable.
I would not have gone through all the work that I did to ensure that we reached that agreement, only to see it changed in some way through these bills. They do not change that Chequers agreement. They do not change that Chequers agreement.
The pro-Leave Tories are one of three groups on the march today, mustering forces for different Brexit outcomes. By getting the government to cave in on the trade bill, pro-Brexit Tories think they've proved they have the numbers to stop the entire Chequers plan and have the support of party members in doing that.
Everybody wants Mrs May to take a tougher line with the EU, and they want this referendum delivered, and actually delivered in a way that respects that result, not membership or a renegotiation of membership of the EU again by the back door.
But a rival protest encircling Westminster got a new figurehead today. The campaign for a second referendum got the backing of the former Education Secretary, Justine Greening.
I think Parliament's reached an impasse, and there is no option I can see that Parliament will be able to support. Every option's going to get voted down. If that's the case, then I think only the British people can give us the clear decision that we need on the right way forward.
The least raucous marchers are those backing Theresa May's Chequers deal. Pro-Remain Tories suggested by caving in to pro-Brexit Tories, the government was actually helping to finish it off.
Tiny minority of the House of Commons as a whole are trying to hold us all to ransom about a reasonable deal with the European Union.
One has to wonder now, who is in charge? Who's running Britain? Is it the Prime Minister, or is it the Honourable Member for North East Somerset? I know where my money's sitting at the...
Number 10 insists it isn't running scared of Jacob Rees-Mogg's group of Brexiteers, the European Research Group. One in the group says the plan is to push government policy back to a Canada-style free trade agreement, even if that means a different Prime Minister.
It is a bit of a tall order, isn't it? She probably won't survive a policy shift like that.
Well, I certainly wanted the policy to change, and I'm very pleased that it has
not
changed.
Particularly bothered who's the Prime Minister, or not bothered whether it's still her.
This is about the country at the end of the day, not about personalities. I don't mind if it's her or whoever does it, just as long as it's done properly and it's really done with the proper passion.
The former Brexit secretary spoke from the backbenches for the first time since his resignation, but he spared Theresa May a full-blown Technicolor resignation speech.
Business. I thought it'd be rather mundane until I walked into what appears to be this rhetorical firefight we've had so far in the debate.
Allies of the former Foreign Secretary say Boris Johnson is weighing up whether to deliver his resignation statement just as the Prime Minister sits down after question time on Wednesday.
Gary Gibbon. We're joined from Westminster by the former Attorney General and leading Conservative Remainer, Dominic Grieve. Dominic Grieve, what an extraordinary day. Rees-Mogg is now in charge.
I'm not sure I would quite characterise it like that, but there's no doubt that the Prime Minister has felt constrained to accept a series of amendments, two of which are relatively innocuous, but two of which were clearly designed to wreck her own policy and strategy. And that's not a very good place to be.
Could you have signed up to the White Paper?
The White Paper is far from perfect, and one can have justifiable criticisms of it. But that having been said, it is the opening position for the United Kingdom in one of the most important negotiations in peacetime in our modern history. And I am content to support the Prime Minister in trying to achieve the outline of what she set out. Doubtless there will have to be more compromises along the way, and there will be more challenges, but not to give her that support and to try to undermine her in the way in which some of my colleagues have done today is massively counterproductive and not in the national interest.
Let's get it clear. If those 4 amendments go through, all 4 of them, will you support the bill?
The bill has got to go on the statute book on the basis that we're leaving. The threat, as I understand it from some of my colleagues, was if they didn't get these amendments, they would destroy the bill, thereby completely undermining the government's position.
But will you oppose those amendments, all of them?
Not all of them, no. 2 of them are innocuous. 2 of them, in my view, are not. And those 2 I will be voting against this evening.
How many are you?
I've no idea how many we will be, because this debate is taking place in the chamber at the moment, and in a sense the outcome of this it matters to me, but it matters less than making a very clear statement that we cannot continue with this kind of bullying undermining the government.
But are you prepared to see the government collapse over this?
I have no desire to see the government collapse over this at all, and nor do I think there's any prospect of the government collapsing because any action I'm taking.
Well, you know, the extraordinary thing is we have these events in Finland with Trump and Putin. We have the shambles in the House of Commons today. The ordinary elector must be looking in and thinking, what has become of our country and our world?
I share the despair. I came into Parliament to try to do good for my country, and at the moment we are mired in a most terrible crisis, which is the result of a paralysis which is itself induced by the referendum decision 2 years ago, and I'm afraid has a slightly inevitable quality about it.
Give us a path out.
The path out is that we have to be willing to listen to each other. We have to be willing to compromise, which some of my colleagues this evening show a remarkable lack of ability to do. And we have to try to identify what the best way out is and listen to what the public are saying to us.
A second referendum?
That's a possibility, because it may be the only way of resolving it, and I think probably would be capable of resolving it.
Are you with
one way or
Justin
the
Greening
other.
on three questions?
I would need to discuss with Justine how one would handle that, but it's clear that if you have a referendum, you've got to consider that one of the outcomes will be one that you may not favour yourself.
Dominic Grieve, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you.
Tonight, all Brexit bets are off. The hardline Brexiteers have managed to hold the Brexit white paper that Theresa May insisted was a carefully crafted policy from which there could be no resiling. Jacob Rees-Mogg and his band of Brexiteers have ambushed the Prime Minister with an amendment to the customs bill that she agreed to, and according to Remainers among the Tories, that kills the white paper stone dead because the EU negotiators will turn it down flat. And such is the chaos, there's a proposal that the recess will have to come early this Thursday, not next Tuesday. But things can get worse before Thursday. I'm joined by our political editor, Nick Watt. Nick Watt, what just happened?
Well, they're still voting. You can probably hear the division bell behind me. But as you were saying earlier, Kirsty, the government, by a knife edge, has won just by 3 votes the crucial vote on accepting an amendment from the Brexiteers on Britain's customs relationship, future customs relationship with the EU. Now, this has come at a price for the government. Guto Bebb, who's a Remain supporter and a Defence Minister, he's resigned in order to vote with the Labour Party on that. Now, this came after the government accepted 4 amendments by Jacob Rees-Mogg, the chief Brexiteer, that go to the heart of the Chequers deal. And the crucial, the most controversial one that the government won by the skin of its teeth would really change the government's original plan on how you deal with customs. Under the White Paper, the original White Paper, the government would have collected EU tariffs for goods arriving in the UK that are then destined to the EU. What now this new law says is that that would be illegal unless the EU does exactly the same for the UK.
So it's a lot of high drama. You've got a minister resigning. What else is about to happen, do you think?
Yes, it has been a very dramatic day. A minister resigning. There were some clashes between Tories. I was talking to one leading Tory Remainer who said they had absolutely no idea they would end up in this position. And it's interesting, Guto Bebb resigning as a Defence Minister. At 10 o'clock he was a rebel. Had he voted to uphold the original government position at lunchtime, he would have been a loyal trooper. And it is, I have to say, Kirsty, a really febrile atmosphere amongst Tory MPs at the moment. The government is planning to have a vote on whether to start the summer holidays for Parliament on Thursday, 5 days early. And the suspicion is they're doing that because they want to avoid those 48 letters going in that could trigger a no-confidence vote in Theresa May. Interestingly, I was talking to one senior Tory at the heart of that process, and this person said to me, there are no hard and fast rules about the letters, so if Parliament's not sitting, maybe they could still go in. So look, Parliament is really beginning to flex its muscles, so I've been taking a look at the Palace of Westminster. As Parliament winds down for the summer recess, it often turns into a sedate affair. Not this year, as Theresa May found herself buffeted on both sides in the Brexit debate.
Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Today, the government was forced to accept demands tabled by the leading Brexiteer, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
I want to speak to the 4 amendments that I have supported and in most cases put my name to. These are broadly in line with government policy, which is why the government has accepted them.
The Brexiteers' success prompted a furious response from pro-European Tories, some of whom vowed to vote with Labour to reject the amendments.
It's just an exercise in bullying. Yep. And it is not my job as a Member of Parliament to put on the statute book clauses in bills which are inadequate, incomprehensible, and on top of that seek to undermine the government, and that's why I describe them as entirely malevolent.
Here,
and for that
here.
reason, I shall be voting against both of them this evening.
Here, here.
The pro-European Tories fear the most controversial amendment by the Brexiteers would severely undermine the Prime Minister's new approach on Brexit. It states that the UK will only ever collect tariffs on behalf of the EU if Brussels does the same for the UK. Brexiteers believe this will be rejected by Brussels, killing off the Chequers deal, a view disputed by the Prime Minister.
I would not have gone through all the work that I did to ensure that we reached that agreement, only to see it changed in some way through these bills. They do not change that Chequers agreement. They do not change that Chequers agreement.
Whatever the Prime Minister says, Brexiteers could barely conceal their glee. One told me they have been immeasurably helped by ex-ministers advising them where to strike the government in its weakest spot. During the afternoon, there was talk that the Chequers deal was dead on arrival, an approach that alarmed pro-Europeans.
It is my firm view that it is deeply regrettable that this government has accepted those amendments, even though they clearly seek to undermine, if not wreck, the great advances that have been made in this white paper.
So a busy and dramatic day for Theresa May. Today will serve as a warning of the power of Parliament, which could force the Prime Minister's hand at the most perilous moment of all, the end of the Brexit negotiations.
Nick Watwell, while at Westminster the parties are divided into ever more permutations of Brexit, how does it all look out in the country? If there were a referendum now and whether politicians were making a fist of Brexit or a hash of it, the result might not be as close as the original vote. Theresa May spent the day away from number 10 at the Farnborough Air Show, a critical showcase for British aerospace hardware and a crucial element of the British export market. Farnborough's in the constituency of Aldershot, which voted leave in the referendum. So how are they feeling about Parliament's inability to agree a way forward? Here's our political correspondent, Alex Forsyth.
Farnborough Airshow today, and on display, skillful navigation, careful coordination, and a clear trajectory. This the place, then, that Theresa May made her latest Brexit pitch.
Oh, wow. We will take back control of our borders, our laws and our money, but we will do so in a way that is good for business and good for our future prosperity.
She knows she's under pressure from every wing of her party, and the scrutiny stretches beyond Westminster. There is focus on what's happening in Tory strongholds, particularly Leave-supporting areas like Farnborough.
Influencing the public view is a deliberate tactic of the Brexiteer Tories. They believe if they convince Number 10 the grassroots aren't with them, then Downing Street will have to shift its policy.
One of those prepared to exert pressure on the Prime Minister, the area's former MP.
I think it's a challenge for the party, but
once Margaret Thatcher's aide, a long-standing Tory, he's now an active Brexit campaigner.
there is a real deep-seated sense of anger. There is a feeling that this opportunity has been completely missed, that the United Kingdom has rolled over. She's got to shift the policy, because the anger in the Conservative Party out there, you need to read the letters pages of the Daily Telegraph.
Here, it wasn't hard to find a Conservative voter who shared that view.
I'm disappointed that we got politicians who aren't following the vote, which was, however long ago it was. We've made a decision to leave, for better or for worse, and I think we should get on and do it.
There is a risk that she might lose her job. It might come to a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Would you be worried about that?
I think that's the problem that every politician has to face.
Unsurprisingly, though, it's not a unanimous opinion among Tory supporters.
Would you urge her to face down the Brexiteers in her party and say, look, this is what I've put forward, this is what we're doing?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
She should be a bit stronger?
I think so. Yeah. But I think the more strong she is, the more against her they're going to be.
And she might risk her job.
That's right. That is right. It worries me, the fact that eventually she will resign or she will have to go and Jeremy Corbyn will step in, and that worries me even more as to what will happen.
90-degree bank turn to the right.
As ever, the Conservative fight with Europe is destabilising the party.
If the Brexiteers really push it too hard, then...
But away from the airfield, the local associations say they've seen no evidence of widespread fury at the government's Brexit plan.
We've had some reports last week and particularly this morning after the weekend of some Conservative MPs having gone back to their constituencies, come back to Parliament and reported this huge backlash at a local level against the Chequers proposal. Is that what you found here?
No, it's not been the case in Aldershot. I think in the main people are fairly pragmatic about the government's position. What they want to see is the government just getting on and delivering Brexit.
Has anyone expressed any concern about the Chequers plan?
I've had 4 members who have expressed concern out of a membership of about 250. So it's not a big mailbox.
Views are split, it seems, from the highest party levels to the grassroots. Possibly there's some spin on both sides about the strength of feeling, but in truth, whichever direction the Prime Minister takes, dare I say, turbulence awaits. The reason this all matters, electoral opinion clearly counts, but crucially, leadership contests can be lost or won at local level.
Alex Forsyth. Well, in a moment we're going to be joined by David Davis from Westminster for Lobby, but now we are joined by Nicky Morgan. Good evening, thank you for joining us. Nicky Morgan, first of all, how did you vote?
Well, I voted with the government, apart from on 2 amendments that have been proposed by Brexiteer colleagues in the party, which I did not support.
So you, the crucial Jacob Rees-Mogg reciprocity and collecting tariffs, how did you vote on that?
I voted not to accept those amendments on reciprocity and also on VAT, which is amending one of the schedules.
So you voted with Labour here, and yet you were defeated by 3 votes, and surely tonight Theresa May is much weaker.
Sorry, Theresa May is?
Much weaker after tonight.
Well, I think the point is that there is always going to be a majority in the House of Commons for a pragmatic and sensible Brexit, which is, I think, what is an offer potentially in the Chequers deal. And we wanted to give the Prime Minister space in order to be able to negotiate that. And I very much regret that some colleagues decided they wanted to amend this particular bill and to make life difficult for the government at this time. It's wholly unnecessary. We just want to give the government space, and I think the mood of the country is please get people to get on with it.
But you're now in a situation where, as it were, the Remainers of the Conservative Party have said quite clearly there's absolutely no way that the EU is going to accept this. So essentially then, this white paper is dead in the water.
I don't know how you can say that the EU is clearly not going to accept this, because we haven't had any formal reaction or negotiations. The point is, it's a starting point. It's proposing an association agreement, a common rule book. It's respecting the result of the referendum, obviously something that I did not campaign for, but we are going to be leaving the European Union, and that's why the Prime Minister deserves the space to be able to negotiate and discuss with the EU over the forthcoming weeks what she has described as a sort of hard-headed and practical suggestion.
But the hard Brexiteers are closing in, and there's talk again of these 48 letters to the 1922 committee. It is perfectly possible that she's not going to survive this.
Well, I think that's not where the majority of the Conservative Parliamentary Party is. I mean, people do not want there to be a leadership challenge.
But it may be inevitable.
Well, things have become inevitable because people don't stand up and say that's not where we want to be. And the majority of the Parliamentary Party have made it clear to some colleagues that they absolutely do not want there to be any form of leadership contest. They want the Prime Minister's leadership to continue. They want there to be space to negotiate Chequers. There is, unfortunately, a hardcore of people, hard Brexiteers in my party who have caused trouble for successive Conservative governments and leaders for the best part of 30 years. They continue to do so. And I think they're doing an enormous disservice to this country.
Well, there's two things there. We'll talk about the impact on the Conservative Party in a moment. But what do you think people think in the country? That actually the elected members of Parliament for the United Kingdom cannot get their act together to fulfil what the promise was of the referendum?
Well, I think the honest truth is that it was not clear what the promise was of the referendum, other than the one question, are you going to leave or are we going to remain members of the EU? We are leaving the EU. That part of the referendum is absolutely being fulfilled. Of course, you know, many millions of people voted for that. Many millions of people did not vote for that. The question is how and on what basis. And that's why we think, you know, I don't agree with everything in the Chequers white paper, for example. I think there are definitely questions about services and what's going to happen with financial services, but it's a good starting point for negotiations with the EU.
And as you say, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and others do not wish this. And you said that this problem over Europe has been at the heart of the Conservative Party for 30 years. Do you actually think the Conservative Party can survive this?
I think that it will survive if people want it to in my party. We've got to be very determined about that. But that means listening and means, obviously, from the leader, the Prime Minister, downwards, everybody working to listen, to respect, to heal the divisions. What was not needed this week were colleagues of mine putting down amendments designed to wreck and to scupper Chequers. That isn't fair. Now, we've seen obviously the government, much to the upset of a number of Conservative MPs like me, who voted not to accept those amendments this evening, have done so. We have the trade bill coming before us tomorrow. We will listen very carefully to what the Minister says, but it's very important that those bills obviously do get their third readings and get onto the progress through Parliament.
Now we're in a situation where we're going in a minute to talk to the colleague on your left, who is David Davis. But I would say to you that during the last few days, the word is that the Brexiteers, led by Jacob Rees-Mogg, have been taking copious briefings from ex-ministers. Before we speak to him, because I know we don't have any blue and blue discussions, seriously, what would you say to David Davis tonight?
What I would say, David, well, I was listening to David's speech earlier on today, and actually he spoke to the House in a very calm and measured way about his experiences as Minister. He implored colleagues not to vote against the third reading of the bill, and that didn't happen tonight. People gave it their support. So I think there's a serious attempt. But I think that the point is that actually what's been put on the table, you know, David's done in terms of he made a decision. This is a proposal he couldn't support, therefore he has resigned from government. It is completely normal for members of Parliament, backbench government members to put down amendments, to probe and to try to improve legislation. It's not normal for people to try to scupper. That's not where David is. He's got the benefit of his experiences. But the point is, if Chequers isn't what's going to be on the table, what's the alternative plan?
Well,
that's why I think we should give Chequers a really good go.
Well, that's exactly a very good question. And now, if you would step aside, and I will speak to David Davis now and exactly say that. If you're not necessarily out to scupper the Chequers white paper, you want an alternative. What is the plan? What is the plan right now, David Davis? Because inevitably, what happened to you on Sunday night has triggered what has happened today.
Well, I mean, the first thing to say about this is, look, this is an incredibly important decision, or set of decisions the House of Commons taken. It's perfectly normal for people to take very different views and be very passionate about it. We've had another minister go this evening over one of these amendments, so you shouldn't be surprised at that. Of course, I have a different view on what we should be doing. I think we shouldn't be so closely harmonised with European law. We should be allowed to go our own way. That was a decision I thought we'd taken some time ago. We should be very careful about arrangements on customs that might lead the European Union to want to have basically administrative control over our customs and our borders. Those sorts of things are bound to cause very, very strong emotions and very, very serious arguments. As Nikki said, I tried to put some of those arguments as calmly as possible today, and in particular said to people, don't be destructive, don't defeat these bills, because these bills are necessary whatever policy we take.
But where do you stand on what people are saying, that actually the EU negotiators are not going to take Section 17 as amended because they don't want that?
Well, let's see. I mean, Nikki was right that it's not a good idea to just guess at what the European negotiators will do. I mean, one of my criticisms, frankly, of the government to date is we've been too willing to accept at first blush everything they say. Now, any negotiation, you're going to set out positions. You're going to telegraph perhaps more than you expect to do, and that's what goes on here. So, we can only test it. We can go out there and test it. If I was still in government, I was saying, okay, on the plane, or send the negotiators on the plane and get to Brussels and talk to them.
You know, David Davis, that however you might say that you are loyal to Theresa May is weakened tonight. She's had to take this amendment. She's had to take this amendment by, I don't know if you were one of the briefers of Jacob Rees-Mogg. It looks like he can do it perfectly well on his own, but there's no doubt that you might say it's the policy you don't want. But the truth is that you've weakened the Prime Minister, and she could be heading for the exit.
So I didn't get that last bit?
And she could be heading for the exit. You have weakened the Prime Minister. When you walked out on Sunday night, followed by Boris Johnson, you weakened the Prime Minister.
No, I made a decision which was based on a difference of principle. I was the Minister, the Secretary of State responsible for the exit of the European Union. The policy being put forward was one that I did not believe in. It would have been dishonest to stay and pretend that I did believe in it, and frankly, I would have been useless at it. I mean, if you've got a policy, you really have to believe in it. And I didn't believe in this. What else did you expect me to do?
But it is absolutely extraordinary that you, as the Brexit Minister, and we can go over this again, didn't see it coming. Should you not have stayed and fought your corner? You've walked away. Have you not disappointed and let down the electorate?
With the greatest respect, you know nothing about what went before. And there were lots of discussions before, including from letters and discussions, and it didn't change the line. So it didn't change the line. I had to go. Very simple.
Are you not down the electorate by this inability to come to a decision?
What, do you think the electorate would expect me to do something I thought was wrong? That strikes me as entirely implausible. My impression of my electorate, and I stand for election, is that they want you to do the right thing, and the right thing in your own mind. They want you to be principled. They want you to stand up for what you believe in. And what I want to stand up for is that 17.5 million voted to leave the European Union and, frankly, leave the single market and the customs union. That was what was said in the referendum of both sides and what was in our manifesto. So I'm afraid I'm just doing what I think the electorate expect me to do.
Very much indeed, David Davis.
Thank you.
Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by the former Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg. Nick Clegg, first of all, your reaction to what happened tonight.
To be honest, I think one shouldn't devote too much energy and attention to all the endless twists and turns of these amendments, because the big picture that counts is, firstly, this is a government now in an outright state of degeneration. It basically can't govern. It's now internally paralysed. Secondly, the EU wouldn't accept the Chequers deal molested by Rees-Mogg's amendments or not anyway.
Of course, Theresa May denies that completely.
Well, I know for a fact that government negotiators have been told that this facilitated customs arrangement or whatever bogus title they apply it to simply will not be accepted by EU negotiators, and that the British negotiators have been told that, and told that some time ago. And thirdly...
But it could be brinkmanship.
It could, well, look, David Davis says you don't know what the EU response is until you hear it, sure, but equally, I don't think one needs to look too hard at what is, in effect, a ludicrous suggestion to realise that this won't work, and let me explain why. No one can reasonably expect that the EU27 should remit to a third country the essential, vital task of policing its external commercial border and collecting taxes which don't belong to us to then to send them onwards to Brussels. That is never, ever going to fly in Brussels, and they've made it quite clear privately, and I'm sure they'll make it clear publicly in the coming weeks. But the crucial thing behind all of this is we are running out of time. The time is simply no longer available to present to MPs a coherent package in October, yet alone on the 29th of March next year. So my view is, given that clearly everyone's going around the bend with all these different amendments and this endless psychodrama within the Conservative Party, and we have this deeply dysfunctional government, we should be planning now in a grown-up and calm way. Absolutely. Well, there is simply no way that this huge, momentous decision, which will have profound impacts on almost every aspect of British public life for years to come, can be done under the frenzy and hysteria and undue haste of this compressed timetable.
The problem with that is that the decision was made for the end of March next year, and you're not so sure, well, nobody could be sure the EU would grant an extension of Article 50.
No, of course you can't be sure about anything in this case. But one thing I can tell you is it's a whole lot better than crashing out with any deal at all, and it's a whole lot more honest with the British people than presenting Parliament, which is what the government is likely now to do, with a pig in a poke in October, where the T's won't be crossed, the I's won't be dotted, and we will basically be lurching out of the European Union in the March of next year without knowing before we leave what our onward destination is. And I think that would be a huge failing of basic democratic principle, that we shouldn't opt for a future until we know what that future is.
And I'm going to talk to you further in a moment about Justine Greening's idea for a second referendum. But first, before I do that, we're not quite sure. Did Vince Cable and Tim Farron vote against the amendments tonight?
I have no idea. I'm not in Parliament anymore.
Well, I thought you might have had a connection. You might have known. Let me go on now to talk about Justine Greening's, as it were, single transferable vote way of doing a second referendum. You vote for the deal, the 3 votes. That she wants a second referendum, which you can vote for the deal that Theresa May's come up with, and you can vote for no deal, or you can vote to remain in the EU. A good idea?
My own view is that it is right to say that whenever, out of all of this turbulence and all of the twists and turns of this sorry story, when we know what the future of leaving the European Union looks like, I think it's right that that should go to the British people. I think it is too early, frankly, to say that there's a list or a menu of 3 questions, 4 questions, 5 questions. And also, incidentally, I should say, I think it's highly unlikely, with the best will in the world, that you could hold a new referendum before the 29th of March. Anyway, I think what people need to understand, and there's no indignity in this, is saying, look, the government clearly triggered Article 50 way too early, before they knew what Brexit they wanted to pursue. They still don't. The EU27 is scratching its head. A country which used to pride itself in political stability and diplomatic aplomb is now a byword for pantomime farce. I think we should everyone should calm down over the summer and give us more time.
The summer might be starting a little early, because we're talking about the recess being Thursday.
That is another sign of degeneration in the government. They can't even run the risk of continuing to put themselves before Parliament beyond this coming Thursday.
Thank you very much indeed. And now, following Nick Clegg, we are joined by the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Peter Dow. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. Tell me, it was high drama in the Chamber, but Labour were voting against an amendment that Theresa May said would be acceptable to Europe, and haven't you let down all the people in your constituency who voted to leave, and leave well?
No, we haven't. What we had there today is complete shambles. Frankly, you had the white paper, and all those votes tonight, or a fair amount of them, actually overturned that. It was just a complete mess, and I think the fact that we almost got within 2 or 3 votes of beating the government on those some of those issues is actually just shows how pathetic the situation is with the government. I mean, they're in complete chaos.
But we still, as yet, do not know exactly where Labour stands. I mean, I know you talk about the 6 tests and so forth, but we're not sure how piecemeal Jeremy Corbyn's going to play this. So where is the red line, in as much as this was about customs? That's a red line? You have to be in the customs union?
I mean, we've had this 1,000,001 times, haven't we? We set out the 6 tests 18 months ago, and when we talk about them, we get told we're not consistent. There are 6 tests. They come together, they're a clump, they're a collective of 6 issues. We've been clear about that for the past 18 months. I mean, I don't really know how much clearer we can actually be on those issues. And then when I start to repeat what the tests are, people tell me, oh, we know what they are. Well, you can't have it both ways. You either know what they are or you don't know what they are, but they're perfectly clear. You might not like them, but they're clear.
If it comes to it, that there's a situation where a combination of Labour and indeed hard Brexiteers could bring down the government over this, would you do it?
Well, look, let's be clear about this. Our line is we will not support a deal unless it fits those 6 tests. Everybody should know what the tests are. I won't repeat them because I get interrupted when I do try to repeat them. As far as we're concerned, perfectly clear, we will vote a deal down if it doesn't fulfil those 6 tests. We can't be any clearer than that. And I'm not getting into all hypothetical stuff. We had enough of that today in the chamber. That's our position, and we'll stick to it.
Is it not the case, though, that people simply want this done? And, you know, for business, for people's personal lives, for jobs, for migration, for all these reasons, it looks as if politicians actually do not have the best interests of the country at the heart of it. They have the best interests of themselves at the heart of it.
No, quite the opposite. We've said we want jobs, a Brexit for jobs, a Brexit for the economy. We've made that clear. Our 6 tests, again, I'm boring people, but it's perfectly clear. We've set those tests out for the past 18 months. We're clear we want a Brexit for the economy and we want a Brexit for jobs. And listening to some of those Tory MPs there tonight, they didn't give 2 hoots for those jobs and the economy, because they're in for this for their own ideological and theological reasons, and I can't fathom them out.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight.